Good afternoon, or we welcome you to Broadband Breakfast Live Online. My name is Drew Clark. I'm editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast, and we are here at Fiber Connect in Nashville, Tennessee. Very excited to welcome our amazing group of panelists
So funny. Okay, Drew, that's funny.
All right. Welcome to Broadband Breakfast Live Online. We are live from the Fiber Broadband Association Conference here in Nashville, Tennessee. I am visited by a wonderful group of advocates, proponents, and enthusiasts for broadband. One of the most topical, timely, and important of which is Gary Bolton. Gary, we're here at the Fiber Broadband Association Conference. You have an incredible group of people here at this conference. Would you mind just giving us a very quick highlight of some of the things that you're taking from this conference here this week?
Well, Drew, thanks. And, I'm glad you guys could all come here to Nashville for our Fiber Connect 2022. And this has been an amazing week. We have over 3,000 attendees here. It's actually our crowd grew 50% year over year. And what's also exciting is that, the press and analysts have been here in droves. So we have over 55 press and analysts. We've had over 200 speakers, 170 different sessions. We kicked off Sunday with we had 4 workshops. And those were all amazing. We also had the broadband forum here talking about 25 gig PON, 50 gig PON. The expo hall has been jam-packed. It's our biggest expo hall ever. And, that's been going fantastic. The speakers we have been amazing. Yesterday earlier this week, we had Andy Burke from NTIA, who was one of our keynote speakers, and got things kicked off on talking about the 3 big NOFOs, Notice of Funding Opportunities, that have been released on May 13th. And that was just being able to get and talk to him in more detail about where those things are going. The Meta, I love the Meta talk about the metaverse and how latency is going to be the long pole in the tent and what we need to do going forward. Catherine DeWitt, from Pew, gave a great talk on, just on different behaviors and where we're heading on broadband. And so it's been an amazing week. One of my favorites has been the proof of concepts. That's kind of new this year. So we have a number of different kind of innovative proof of concepts. And so while I was talking about 25 gig PON, 50 gig PON, Nokia actually was doing a demonstration of 100 gig PON. That's 100 gig PON. This is real live. I actually pulled fibers out and fibers and saw what was going on with their screen and the constellations. And anyway, it's just been a fantastic week.
It truly does seem as though everyone acknowledges that fiber is the technology that's going to be deployed. And from that perspective, it's been a ratification of a message that Fiber Broadband Association has been delivering for some time. But still, less than 20% of American households have fiber right now. What does that mean for the other 80%? How soon can they look to get that fiber, Gary?
Well, that's the thing about what's exciting time in our industry is, first of all, the administration, Department of Commerce, and NTIA made the biggest possible statement of prioritizing end-to-end fiber networks for our critical broadband infrastructure. So that kind of clears the deck. So the market has spoken. We're moving forward, building out our critical infrastructure with fiber. And so now is really to put this money to work. There's over $130 billion available. The administration put out a statement about a week ago that said, okay, there's 25 billion now that's already in programs with, they named 4 different states, and the rollout from the ARPA money and the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund. We also have, RDOF somewhere about $5 or $6 billion that is actually going to be put to work. We have RUS is putting they have more money coming in their programs. And so while the BEAD money, the 42.45 billion, that's probably, we won't see that actually flowing till the end of next year at the earliest, and that's the first 20%, and another year or so beyond that for the other 80%. We really have, for the rest of the decade, we're going to have plenty of CapEx to make this happen. And then right here next door is they're doing fiber optic technician training, train the trainer, and that's our nationwide rollout to make sure that we have the boots on the ground to get all this fiber deployed. So I just think the energy, the excitement from our event just really demonstrates
absolutely
how the whole industry is kind of coming together to really try to close this digital gap. What the worst thing could happen is we take money and we go build to this 100 by 100 or 100 by 20 or some kind of
Right.
random number that someone throws out there. And then we're, just like we've done with CAF before, right? 4-1, 10-1, 25-3,
Right.
we keep building to speed. So now that we have limitless capacity, it's really about, getting this job done. And, another exciting thing for the conference is the number of cable operators are here. We worked with ACA to build a cable track and to make sure that we have plenty of content. And we really wanted to make the cable industry feel really welcome to, come into our fiber industry. And that's been great.
Well, and I do think that there has been a shift. People are looking at this like every single person in America, maybe with an extremely small remote handful of exceptions. Everyone needs to get fiber. It's kind of, there has been a shift in mindset to the rural electrification mindset where everyone needed to have electricity. Everyone needs to get the best quality broadband, which, as you said, is fiber. So you've really teed up well the topic for the rest of our panelists here. I'm joined by Kimberly McKinley, the Chief Marketing Officer at Utopia Fiber, the largest open access network that's operating in the United States. Scott Menard, who's the Chief Information Technology Officer at Traverse City Light and Power in Traverse City, Michigan, and Bob Knight, who is in the leafy suburb of Ridgefield, Connecticut. Bob, you of course are a broadband industry professional, and you work with the city of Ridgefield.
So I serve as Economic and Community Development Commissioner. In my 7th term, we have a commission of 7 really talented people, 6 talented people, and then they sort of keep dusting me off, bringing me back, I guess.
Well, let's get right into the heart of the topic. What do municipalities think of the National Telecommunications and Information Administration's BEAD program? Gary referenced that. It's the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Program, and has the bulk of these money. Not all of the more than 100 or nearly 100 billion, but 42.5 billion. That's a lot of money. Scott, let's start with you. What are your concerns or thoughts about this notice that came out just over a month ago now?
Well, I think from a municipality perspective, which I represent Traverse City Light and Power, which is a public power company up in northern Michigan, but we also built the smart grid out to provide broadband to the citizens. And that's something I want to talk about with Gary, is to thank him and his staff for this wonderful Fiber Connect, but also coexisting with APPA, the American Association of or American Public Power Association, which is going on right now. And so I'm able to ping pong back and forth. We will roll both conferences. So thank you, Gary and the team. But we're very excited about it. There's a lot to gain from it, from a public or from a municipal perspective. And I think there's, as time goes on and looking at how it's hitting, there's going to be some tweaks along the way to really operationalize it and really hit home with each state. And so from that muni perspective, we're super stoked and excited.
Let's just drill in just a little bit. Do you currently offer a fiber to the home?
Yes, we do.
And how long in Traverse City?
We've been doing it for about 1.5 years now. We've been doing dark fiber for the better part of 15, 20 years. And then as we expanded our grid operations, we were building out fiber. And so as an ancillary benefit, we started providing fiber to the home.
And do you have the kind of the business plan / financial commitment to be able to get everyone in your community, or is that something you would need sort of funding from the government's BEAD program?
We were actually, prior to the BEAD announcement, we were working with the USDA on their smart grid expansion program, and we were awarded some funding through that program. But as we expanding to the more rural region of Traverse City, we're actually looking and entertaining applying for some BEAD funding to hit those customers as well.
So you're really actively looking at that,
Absolutely.
and weighing and measuring the pros and cons of different aspects.
Sure. I mean, there's potential there on all sides of it. And, we really want to, in our town, we really want to bridge from tourism to technology and kind of just expand as the major network provider for northern Michigan. And so that is a big footprint, which will take some funding because those rural areas get very, very tough to deploy to.
Is that why? Because nobody wants to go to Traverse City in the middle of the
winter. You gotta love winter and you gotta be active.
Well, Kim, it's been so exciting to see the progress of Utopia Fiber over the last 10 years as you've kind of gone from sort of being a little bit more on the defensive to being very assertive and very expansion oriented, not only in the 11 cities that are originally part of the Utah Telecommunications Open Infrastructure Agency, but now you're doing projects all over the place in Utah, in Idaho, in Montana, California. Talk a little bit about Utopia Fiber and how you see the current moment for fiber broadband.
I think the moment for fiber broadband is huge. And I think from Utopia's perspective, we started this, you know this more than most, Drew, that we started this in 2002 as a concept. So to think that our leaders in our cities started this in 2002 and thought that connectivity was that important is amazing. But we are made up, we are an interlocal agency in the state of Utah. Usually most people consider that a JPA in other places. 11 cities that started this, but now we're in fiber to the home in 18 Utah cities. We have business class services in 50 Utah cities. We are the operational partner with Idaho Falls Fiber. We are the operational partner for Yellowstone Fiber up in Bozeman. And we have recently signed an MOU with RCRC out of California, which is a 38 county project.
So is that Golden State project?
Golden State Connect, yes. It's under the RCRC umbrella. So we are a tad busy, but I think what we are seeing is that from a municipal network like Scott is, we've seen the growth of municipalities in this space, and we're just helping other municipalities across the country get into it.
Now, all of this expansion you've been able to do because of successful past performance through revenue bonds, as I understand. Kim.
Yes.
So is that model able to take you everywhere you need to go? Or would you at Utopia Fiber want to sort of apply for and access BEAD funding too?
It's interesting. I think that most of our growth has been municipal bonds. Some of them are revenue bonds, some of them are still backstopped by cities. But one thing that we did see is creative financing measures. Yellowstone Fiber is actually a 501c3, and we did that. They did that bonding of over 65 million with no real backstop. It's a conduit. There was a conduit from Gallatin County, but they had less than a 4% interest rate on that. So we have some great financial partners, no matter what deal we bring to the table, that they're creative with that. Regarding the BEAD funding, I think that we are always looking for opportunities, but what we're seeing at Utopia is that most of the cities that are approaching us already have two major incumbents in them.
Right.
So they're not necessarily qualified for the BEAD funding. But what I think is really important that I'm super want to give kudos to NTIA and the federal government is that they didn't exclude open access networks in this money, because a lot of the previous money has excluded open access because you have to be the retail provider. And so I think that they have really given credence that open access is a model, maybe not the model for every community, but it is a valid model if communities want to go down that road.
Well, and we've certainly had CEO of Utopia Fiber, Roger Timmerman, on Broadband Breakfast Live Online and other occasions, and we've drilled into open access and what that means and what some of the advantages are. We won't talk about that in particular today, but we do want to talk about cities and municipalities. And Bob, just a moment ago, you referenced the American Association of Public Broadband, AAPB, and I think you said that this was kind of, incubated within a fiber broadband association committee. Do you want to say a little bit about that, Bob?
So three of us here, Kim, Scott, and I, were 3 of the 5 founding board members of AAPB, American Association for Public Broadband. It's sort of the idea germinated through a committee that Kim and I co-chair for Fiber Broadband Association for Public Officials. There's 150 cities, towns, counties, and state agencies that are actively involved in that work group. And we've been around, I guess, about 2 years with FBA. And, as FBA is a big tent organization representing fiber in general, we felt we looked at all the advocacy groups, in DC and nationally, and there really wasn't a very clear voice for municipal broadband. And so, we approached Gary and said, hey, what do you think? He said, hey, we'd be very, very supportive of it. We've met with NTIA, we've met with APPA. Everyone is very, very supportive. Everyone wants to link up and move the ball forward with AAPB. And I think what's kind of special where we hit the nerve is that we saw over the course of 2021, when we were talking about pandemic related funding, whether it was ARPA, whether it was IIJA, that muni broadband didn't have a seat at the table. And we're not advocating for any particular model.
Right. Not necessarily open access or city run. ecumenical.
Yes.
Correct. And right, if a community wants to partner with a large incumbent, great. If they want to go on the WISP route, fantastic. I don't like that. But if they
We have a lot of WISP members, so.
but if they want to build their own network, fantastic. We feel that a network should meet community needs. Figure out what those community needs are, build and design your network for that, and do it for the benefit of the community, whether it's digital divide, whether it's economic, whether it's quality of
And I
life.
think that we started it because we would just want communities to have a choice of how they want to dictate their future. And there's 18 states that have regulations against municipal broadband in some format. And we want to give cities whatever lane they want to go to build whatever kind of network they want to build. And I think that is kind of some of the backstory.
Right, and there was no voice in the process throughout anything in 2021, and we just wanted to reverse that. And we saw the impact that you could have. So through National League of Cities and through ILSR, there was delegation of about 15 of us that met with the White House back in spring 2021, and we were looking at the interim Treasury rules. And remember when they first came out, the rule was 25/3, and they didn't permit overbuilding. And we basically said, okay, all this is well and done, but you're about to pump billions of dollars into this. And basically all you're doing is solidifying the same failed policies that got us into the national broadband mess. So unless you change the rules, say 100 symmetrical, which, MT's fiber, and unless you allow for some form of overbuilding, all you're doing is just baking the same policy and just wasting money.
Well, and you were successful. Those rules.
We were successful, and we really realized that it doesn't take much. Look, the telecom lobby is spending $8 million a week in DC, and it's not a David versus Goliath. It's just we need a counter argument in there, and that's why we were formed. That's why we were created.
So, from the perspective of municipalities that are considering funding through BEAD or other programs, other projects, what are some of the issues? And actually, before I just pose that, I want to acknowledge that NTIA did an incredible job in ensuring that municipalities are not excluded, right? And in fact, they went so far as to say that state laws that restrict municipal broadband are basically going to be ignored for the purposes of implementing BEAD, because those states that want to get programs will need to be able to funnel them or pass them on to municipalities, like Tennessee, for example, right? And other states. So just to kind of put that out there, that the NTIA has not been unsympathetic to the views of public broadband. At the same time, there's obviously some issues and concerns that you've identified. And we heard a little bit about this when I had the chance to interview Alan Davidson at Mountain Connect a few weeks back. I think he said that, well, these aren't closed, done deal. There's open to changes. So what are some of those things that are most important to change? Who would like to take that?
I'll start. I think the letter of credit is one of the biggest concerns that we're seeing, that communities just can't get the letter of credit in order to build these. I think that's the one that I'm hearing over and over against the communities. I think the second one is, for new municipalities, they have to have a history of a track record of building these networks or something. So if you're starting this, how do you have the track record in place? I think that though they're willing to listen to them, I really think they were well-intended rules that were put in place because of other past programs that have had some shots fired at them because of some of these missteps.
Okay, so the letter of credit requirement, is that just hard to obtain, or is it impossible to obtain?
Well, I can give you a real world example of that. So in the private sector, my company works with Vermont CUD Association. And so I believe during RDOF, they had to get a letter of credit for $200,000, for that. So they don't have like Bank of America up in that region. They don't have they have small community banks. So to obtain that letter of credit, they had to go to a banker in Boston, a private banker in Boston, who had to partner with a bank in California. And you have to go through the process once a year. But what makes the matter even more complex is that you have to have that money in the bank. And so it comes off your books, and it looks like you have a debt. Meanwhile, you do have that money in the bank, for the match. So it makes it entirely complex. And that's only for $200,000. And these are for small municipalities. You multiply that exponentially when you're talking about a widespread fiber build, and that's an impediment to deployment.
Scott, what's your perspective on the letter of credit issue, for example?
I mean, I sentiment exactly what Bob McKim just said. I mean, it's going to be challenging. I think, you know, for companies especially that haven't been building before, to really solidify that and take that framework and move forward with it, because, you know, things like Fiber Connect exist because municipalities and they want to learn more about it. Then they have to jump through that loophole, which is a significant endeavor. And so it just seems very challenging up front to be able to pacify that money coming in.
And it's not really limited to municipalities. It's all potential grant applicants are facing that. But I'd say that's the number one thing that we've heard from all our members, because it's not just expensive and difficult to get. It's not, banks aren't really excited about doing it because there's really no money in it for them. And so it's just a lose-lose from everybody, because it's difficult for operators or municipalities or whatever to be able to obtain. The banks really, it's nothing in it for them to be able to, you know, work with anybody on developing it. And so, you know, what we hear from members is, you know, do progress payments or things that, you know, you can protect yourself.
Right.
If the goal is to make sure that you have the wherewithal to be able to deliver, then, you know, you can maybe come up with a different way to approach that.
So are there the letter of credit issue, which again, these would hit a non-municipality as well.
Yeah.
The issue that you identified, what was the other issue you identified?
I think you have to have a track record.
The track record, exactly. So are there other ways to kind of get around that? I mean,
I think you would have to look at different models to get away with that. I think it's like the P3 model that Carrie talks about, the partnering. We get around some of those requirements.
Right, public-private partnerships, but also, you know, like Kim's model would be perfect because, you know, Utopia has a track record, and then they can be able to replicate that with other communities. So there's a number of ways that you can be able to do that. You know, as I like saying, I've never met a mayor that wants to be in the broadband business, but they all want to be in the jobs business and economic development business. And so, you know, no community sitting there saying, oh yeah, we just dying to be a broadband service provider. But, you know, you have to get broadband to every member of the community. And so you need to be able to look and say, what is the best way that we can get future-proof broadband? And not just for capacity, but, you know, public safety, you know, smart grid modernization, be able to be in position for 5G. You know, this is infrastructure you're going to be building on for, you know, generations to come. So you need to be able to make sure that every member, you know, that's really just, you know, got to protect ourselves, you know, from all this money going out to make sure that these projects are viable, that, you know, operators have the wherewithal to be able to do that, and the experience to be able to be successful. So if you have no experience, then you find partners that can help you be able to deliver that.
Bob, what are some of the other concerns that you've heard about the notice of funding opportunity, or by contrast with really positive things about it that will help public broadband providers?
So there's a lot of positives, right? And I think NTIA, as you said earlier, should be applauded. You know, Alan Davidson and his team, you know, Sarah Morris, that they've all done an amazing job with that. I think there's two other areas that we're hearing a lot of concern on. One is the Buy American clause. You know, supply chain issues, right? You know, people are building now, you know, sourcing of materials. We're seeing the cost of these projects, you know, up 30%. You know, even construction cost of diesel fuel has gone up exponentially. So there's all these change orders when it comes to construction. So, you know, layering that in, the marketplace is in flux right now. And then we have these rules that are a little bit rigid. So the money is not going to go as far as we need it to. So that Buy American clause has to be looked at. And there really needs to be some flexibility. The other issue, this is something that that Gary, that you highlighted on FBA webinar not too long ago, about the timing of the flow of the money, right? So the state broadband offices are going to start receiving about 20% of the funds 2023, 2024 as they stand up programs, and then the other 80% starts flowing 2025, 2026. You know, ironically around an election year cycle, but you know, that's the way these things go, right? But you know, here's the thing. Communities need to move now, and they're moving now. And so what do they do in the interim? You know, What are the other programs that are out there? What are the other funding models? What's the partnership? So I think folks are looking for some clarity right now, and they're a little bit impatient.
So by clarity, you mean, are we going to be able to get this Buy America issue addressed, for example? Is there a way to get that addressed short of a legislative enactment?
Well,
Gary, what's your thought on that?
First of all, the Buy America is OMB, so it's not really NTIA. And so, obviously IIJA, there's a statute that NTIA was, basically had to meet the obligations of the statute. And so I think, I was there for the Alan Davidson interview that you had with the assistant secretary. And, the thing I was really encouraged by a number of things. First of all, they got these NOFOs out early. Getting out on a Friday versus Monday might not seem like a big thing, but it's huge because I think it set a huge statement to the industry that NTI was really serious about this. They put their best foot in getting things out early versus and kind of letting these things drag on, which could have really easily been done. So, getting those things out early.
And they had two NOFOs they didn't need to release even on Monday, but they released them together.
Exactly.
So that's a sign, just like you're saying, oh, we got their month. No, we're going to get this out. So there's clarity and they get their marketing campaign, Internet for All.
So they get it out. They have Andy on a road show,
Yeah.
and Alan Davidson's been out. So when I was speaking to Andy yesterday, he's like, you got to think about it. There's 56 states and territories, 3 different NOFOs. You multiply those things together, where there's a lot of stuff on the table that they're having to take care of. The other challenge, I hosted a state broadband offices workshop on Sunday, and so the state broadband offices are like, well, first of all our top people got drafted by NTIA to go work for NTIA. And so everybody there is like, yeah, I'm at the state broadband office. I started, a couple months ago. Or
a couple weeks ago.
End of last year.
Did you give them a hug and say, I'm sorry?
And then they said, my office has 1 person and we don't have 3. And even just like I had Illinois on Fiber for Breakfast a few weeks ago. And I'm like, well, you got $5 million of planning money. Why don't you hire a whole bunch of people? And he's like, well, you don't really understand how Illinois works, but for my agency to be able to staff up means that another agency has to staff down. And so, it's just not, you can have money, but it doesn't necessarily mean you get headcount. And so there's a challenge of being able to get these things staffed up. But luckily we have some amazing engineering consulting companies that are going to be working with these state offices. But I mean, that's why we, Fiber Broadband Association with NTCA put out the playbook, the broadband infrastructure playbook out in March to get ahead of this, so that, and that really helped. I think, every broadband office that I spoke to say, this has been tremendous amount of help, because again, they don't have huge staffs. They don't have people that can do all this stuff for them, so that, if you give them something that's, not an advocacy piece, but real kind of stating the facts, the statute kind of gets these things going. So again, we get to Buy America, we got to be really, really careful, because, the taxpayers are spending $2 billion now to rip Huawei out of the network. The last thing you want is Chinese fiber or some gray market fiber to get out, because people say, oh, supply chain, I'll get something that comes to Canada and I don't know where it came from. And so we have one of our working groups is on trusted fiber to make sure that we can authenticate,
like vouch for the source of the fiber.
Yeah, that's
right, because it's critical, because this fiber, as I mentioned, we're going to put 100 gig, we're going to put terabytes on this stuff, and it's got to be safe, secure, sustainable, and so just like putting up a building, you don't want gray market concrete to put up a parking deck or a building, right? This has to last the test of time. And so
it's infrastructure. You really need it to last.
Exactly.
And
and
you
so
can't have it crumble in a few years. Sorry.
And
Yeah,
national
That's a big one. right?
National security as
And
well.
national security, because it is.
yeah, so anyway, to get to the Buy America, so it's, the intent is there, but there's some challenges. And so this kind of NTI, it's really OMB that's going to have to figure this out. And so we're going to have to work through the nuances of that, of how do we try to get as much jobs in America and be able to have trusted sources of supply, but be able to get materials when people need it, and be, because we, these, if you look at ARPA money, look at coronavirus capital, these all have timers on it, and they got to get stuff deployed.
Well, this definitely seems to be an issue that many associations could be working in a united front on. Isn't that the case, Bob and Gary and Scott?
Well, certainly, yeah, and you know, Gary mentioned something earlier also about the state broadband offices, and I think it's important to note that AAPP, you know, well, we've talked about $8 million a week spent by a big telco lobby in Washington. The game's being played in the state broadband offices in the states, and you talk about the intellectual capital that went to NTIA, and you have a lot of newcomers in the state offices. And you know, I'll give an example. So I was at I was on a panel with the state broadband director a couple of months ago, and boy, you know, just following this person around like the shadow was the head of the cable lobby in that particular state. Like this person, she couldn't stop without this other person bumping into her, and that's the level of advocacy efforts that's going on today, and that's the level that we're going to try to counterbalance and just make sure that the other side of the story is being told in a balanced approach with these new sectors.
Especially with some of the new talent coming into the state broadband offices, right? Like there's a lot of work to go to. I mean, they're passionate, they're enthusiastic, but without that intellectual capital that was there prior, right? There could be some flex, and that's why you get lobbyists following them around. And so something, you know, has to happen at that level to stop that or have a voice on that other side of that.
I think that's important because I mean, there was a conference that was a couple months ago, and I was meeting a state broadband director, and she just is looking at me and she's like, "Can you give me any advice?" And she's like, "I have nowhere to start. I don't know what panel should I go to." She was just so lost. And I think that's the time I just saw how much we're putting on these state broadband offices and what the responsibility of this money is and how they're feeling. You know, a lot of them feel lost in this record amount of money that's coming out.
Well, Kim, that kind of gets to the issue I wanted to raise, which is, aren't there some advantages that municipalities have in terms of working with, you know, people who are also in government and state government in terms of building that kind of level of trust? Scott, for example, what kind of work or relationship have you been able to build within the state of Michigan with others who are in broadband?
We actually, you know, had meetings directly with the state of Michigan. It was the Department of Transportation budget. It's IT. It's all incorporated into one. We had them in our offices, and we talked broadband initiatives prior to our deployment.